This is an excerpt from the Indy Star, written by Sarah Nelson. The X-ray shows where the bullet lodged in the girl's hand. It took surgeons 45 minutes in August to remove the projectile, which shattered then 9-year-old Kalea Brown's pinky bone and traveled just short of her thumb. White scar tissue the size of a pencil eraser is all that remains. But not all scars are visible. Brown regularly sees a therapist. Her younger sisters, 6-year-old Arayla and 3-year-old Zariah, who shared the bunk bed struck when bullets sprayed into their apartment, still awakened from the slightest noise even after moving into a new home, miles away from the events of that morning. The family of 5, through no fault of their own, are now dealing with the consequence of the gun violence plaguing Indianapolis streets. Despite crime, including shootings, trending down this year to the tune of 13%, some of the city's youngest residents will forever carry the burden of being stricken by gunfire, often at random. The latest data from Indianapolis police shows 9 kids younger than 9 years old have been shot in the city as of December 28th. Many children survived the shooting, but whether their physical injuries only require a Band-Aid or intensive surgery, the impacts are long-lasting, and they extend beyond the child who got hurt.
Welcome to Unloading, a podcast created to share community solutions for gun violence in America. Unloading was created by Gun Violence Solutions of the American Medical Women's Association. I'm Kat, a pre-medical student in Chicago and assistant director of the American Medical Women's Association.
And I'm Minorvi, a 4th-year medical student based in New York. And we're here to show you how individuals across America are responding to gun violence in their communities.
Good morning. Today we have with us Deandra. Deandra is a volunteer with the Indiana chapter of Moms Demand Action and a senior fellow with the Everytown Survivor Network. On February 1st, 2014, Deandra's 13-year-old son, DeAndre, was struck by a stray bullet at a birthday party. Dre survived, but was critically wounded and can no longer walk or talk. Since Dre was shot, Deandra has become a dedicated activist with a focus on raising awareness for wounded and disabled victims of gun violence and the struggles they face. Deandra now oversees a new advocacy and support program for non-fatal shooting survivors for the City of Indianapolis. Funded by the American Rescue Plan, the program is operated in partnership between Deandra, the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, IUPUI's O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs, and the Indianapolis Office of Public Health and Safety. Deandra is also the founder and executive director of Purpose4MyPain, a resource hub providing support for women and families personally affected by gun violence. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us about your story and how you came to be a part of the Indiana Moms Demand Action chapter?
How I became a part of Moms Demand Action, my son DeAndre, who's my oldest child, I have 2 young men, 2 boys. They're young men now. Dre was shot and critically wounded on February 1st, 2014 by a stray bullet. He was at the right place at the right time. I always say that because he was at a birthday party of a 15-year-old. He didn't sneak out. He didn't, steal my car to go do anything. He went to a 15-year-old's birthday party on a Friday evening hosted by the young man's mother and his aunt, and some of his mom's friends were all chaperones. A stray bullet flew through the window, pierced Dre in the back of the head. And as you said in the bio, it left him nonverbal and also a quadriplegic. So since then, he hasn't walked or spoken a word.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you for, being very transparent about your story, your son's story. I can't even imagine, the healing process that's been.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in the past, you've spoken with prominent leaders like President Obama, and you've worked with Congresswoman Lucy McBath and Senator Chris Murphy about gun safety. Mm-hmm. How do you initiate conversations about gun safety in your own community?
Well, for one, you lead with being transparent. So for me, I don't always lead with just sharing my story, but I lead with saying, I understand to some extent where you've been and what you are going through. as it pertains to speaking to other families about the tragedy of gun violence and how it's impacted their lives. And if I'm speaking with a local legislator here, it's the same thing. I lead with my story, but I also, in those cases, I lead with my story more often, but also not only my story, but my work and how I work with so many other families. So many families have lost their loved ones to gun violence. And so it's just, sharing that pain, getting to the heart of the matter, the heart of a mother. I can only speak about my pain as DeAndre's mother, and with all the other women I've been able to connect with on this journey and the pain that they've experienced. We try to humanize the stories. We can give data all day long, and I love data. I've come to love data, but it's humanizing the stories and putting faces to them as well, faces to the pain.
Yeah, I like that you talked about humanizing it, because I think so often we get lost in statistics, and that's how we kind of normalize the issue. But when we talk about individuals and, the lives that were taken because of this issue, it really becomes a human issue rather than a political issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think like community members, or in Indianapolis, do you think members are pretty receptive to talking about gun safety? What is the gun culture like in Indianapolis?
Well, our numbers have been on the rise up and down for the last 5 or 6 years. So the gun culture here amongst lawmakers, we just like most cities, we have a set that are fighting for change, advocating with Moms Demand Action. We just had our advocacy day last week. We had a roster full of legislators, politicians there supporting. And then, of course, we had some that didn't show up. We had some that did not want to sit down and meet with the moms. They couldn't seem to clear their calendar to meet with their constituents. And so that's a problem. So just like many other major cities in the U.S., we're divided. We're truly divided. Last July, we passed the permitless carry, which, doesn't seem in a city where gun violence is trending up. It seems unreal that happened, but that's because of the division and the lack of our legislators seeing the human side of this issue. They thought it was okay for 18-year-olds to carry without a permit. It just doesn't make sense when our numbers are trending up. And shortly after July 1st, we had several teenagers killed or shot and wounded.
Wow. So you mentioned the permitless carry. The City of Indianapolis launched new advocacy and support programming for non-fatal shooting survivors that you oversee. Can you tell us a little bit more about the advocacy work that you're doing for non-fatal shooting survivors?
Yes. So I have actually been hired as a contract employee with our local police department. And as you said, it's funded by ARPA funds. And I now have 2 people on staff with me who have personal stories of being impacted by gun violence. And we are embedded with our aggravated assault unit. So we're working directly with the detectives who are getting these cases. And we reach out to the families 24 to 48 hours, sometimes hours, actually, after a shooting has occurred, if they haven't went like immediately into surgery or something of that nature. And for one, we ask, how are you? How are you doing? It's one thing for a doctor to ask, but someone from the outside to simply say, I'm just here to check in, to show that I care, to show that your community cares. How are you doing? And from there, the conversation goes on to discuss, what kind of support do you need? Do you need connections with therapy? Do you need to get insurance set in place? Do you need medical transportation? Do you need information on rehab facilities? Can we feed your family while they're at the hospital with you? Just making those personal connections. And for me, it's everything that I did not get when Dre was shot and wounded. I had my family, which was amazing, great support. But to have someone from the other side actually just reach out and say, hey, how are you? That didn't exist. To give me resources, to give me a path or direction. My son was shot at 13. Our life was good. And to have him become paralyzed, I didn't know how I was going to transport. I didn't know where to find a wheelchair van. I didn't know how he was going to be at home. How could I set that up? I didn't know what facilities we had here for long-term care, for short-term care. It was non-existent. So now this program is a pathway for families to get that kind of information as well as support. And we advocate for our families as well. A couple of weeks ago, we went to a school with a young man. He hadn't been to school in almost a year. After being shot, he's now a paraplegic. We went and sat down with the principal, all the administrators, and set up a plan to get him back into school where he could feel safe and feel protected and not judged, because when he was once with his peers, he was walking, and now he's a paraplegic.
Wow, that's incredible. Do you know if there's programs like that in other cities in Indiana?
In Indiana, no. But St. Louis does non-fatal outreach. Louisville does, and Chattanooga. And Baltimore. They do non-fatal outreach. It's not something that's super popular, but hopefully, as we continue to speak out about this, the thing that in Indianapolis last year, we had 557 non-fatal shootings. I believe we had 185 in homicides. So non-fatal is typically almost triple the homicide rate. So the importance of reaching out to non-fatals, we're creating, we're kind of closing that gap on community and police relations. That's our goal. We also want to work on case closure, and we also want to reduce retaliation. The show that I was just on, the one thing that the host, he always says, we have non-fatals because good doctors and a bad shooter, bad aim. But what happens when there's continual retaliation because someone did survive? So when we get in and we intervene with non-fatals, with all these different entities that are working in this space, we can reduce homicides because no one wants to see a life taken or altered.
That's amazing. I really wish that there was more outreach for non-fatal shooting victims in other cities. So you're really like a pioneer in your city and really in the nation, because there's so few programs right now.
Exactly. That's incredible.
We actually wrote a workshop symposium for a National Association of Victim Assistance, NOVA, and it got accepted. The reason that I did this with Dr. McGee from IUPUI is because I looked through the itinerary, nothing. Association of Victim Assistance, nothing for non-fatal. It was unreal to me, as I have been on this journey for 9 years with my son, and I've seen the lack of support. But on a national level, at a convention, no support for non-fatals. Well, the good news is they accepted our proposal. So in July, we will be in New Orleans sharing the work of non-fatal support through local police departments.
That's exciting.
I am when I tell you I'm so excited, I promised Dre I would be his voice, and that makes me emotional, but I promised, and that's what I'm doing.
Thank you. That's truly amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you talked about kind of the different partnerships that you have made in the community that provide resources for non-fatal shooting survivors, or the specific partnerships that the program that you're working with operates between is the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, the IUPUI O'Neill School of Public Health or Public and Environmental Affairs, and then the Indianapolis Office of Public Health and Safety. So between yourself and these three entities, how do you envision these partnerships supporting non-fatal shooting survivors?
The vision is meeting the families where they are, having an understanding of the need, and even having an understanding of the why. It's important when we're doing this work is to get to the root cause of why did the perpetrator take those steps? Why did they decide to resolve conflict through gun violence? And then how do we help you on your journey of recovery for the injured as it pertains to the desire to retaliate? If you heal to that magnitude where that's even a thought. When I think about DeAndre, there was no reason to retaliate, but he wouldn't even be able to formulate that kind of thought. And then what does it look like supporting someone on their journey so that they don't feel hopeless or helpless? The mental impact of surviving a gunshot wound and living life differently is so heavy. So again, with these partnerships and these programs, we want to make sure that we're meeting the mental health needs as well.
Yeah, mental health is so important because I think people often think of the physical impact, when you survive a gunshot wound, but the mental aspect is really prominent and really an issue. So yeah, that's really cool.
You mentioned preventing retaliation. How do these conversations usually go? Are people receptive to these conversations about not taking action after they've been wounded? I'm curious about that.
It goes both ways. You know, some people are super receptive because their first thought is, I lived, I survived, I'm done. And then there's others who are just angry, honestly. So that's where de-escalation really comes in. They're angry. They don't understand why, or there was a situation over the weekend, and one of the thoughts was, it was just a fight. Why did somebody start shooting? And that, a lot of us say that. What happened to just fighting? Even though we don't want to see that kind of violence either. But what happened to just fighting versus someone always feeling like they need to pull out a handgun? So those conversations are tough. Just to be honest with you, they're not always the easiest conversations to have, because it just always go back. It so often goes back to, well, they did this to me, they did that to me, and that feeling of aggression and anger and feeling like I've been treated unfairly. But there's great people working in the space to help with the de-escalation and diffusing the situations.
Yeah, de-escalation is such important work.
It is very important, life-saving work.
Exactly. So, Deandra, how did you become founder and executive director of Purpose for My Pain, and what is the mission of the organization?
So I became founder for a couple of reasons. What I noticed with DeAndre being shot, being 13 years old and injured to the magnitude that he was, is people, they victim blame. And I wanted to make sure that people knew my son for who he was. DeAndre had nothing to do with that shooting. Somebody was asked to leave the party. Instead of leaving, our only assumption is they shot up the home. We really don't know, because no one was ever caught or charged in Dre's shooting. But what they did is they changed the life of an innocent victim. And I wanted to be a part of that narrative of changing that conversation about young Black men being shot and wounded or having their life shot and taken. I also wanted to find purpose. Again, I said this earlier, it sounds like a cliche, but it really is the lifestyle that I live, finding purpose for so much pain. My son was not perfect, but my goodness, he was 13 and had so much ahead of him. I couldn't understand, why? Why, God? Why would you allow this to happen? Dre was a high honor student. He was labeled gifted and talented. My son had everything ahead of him. He could have been graduating from Harvard right now. He was just a natural at his schoolwork and even at sports and things. He just had so much. So I had to get down to the why in order for me to have peace inside of me, as to why God allows something like this to happen. And the mission and the vision of Purpose for My Pain is to support families with aftercare in the aftermath of gun violence, with aftercare, such as elevating their stories, support groups, grief groups, and just having a community around them that says, I hear you and I understand, and I'm here to walk this journey with you.
That's wonderful. So what has the organization done so far to support or advocate for those experiencing gun violence?
Oh my goodness, it's been so amazing. We're hitting year 8 of Purpose for My Pain. But some of the things we've done in the past, last year we gave away 3 scholarships to 3 young men who have been personally impacted by gun violence. They had all lost a sibling to gun violence. And that's something that was year 3 of giving away the scholarship. It's called When Life Gives You Chocolate, Make Hershey's. My son used to say that all the time. And I did not know that until Dre was shot. And all these cards came through from his school, and they made these huge banners. And every banner said, When life gives you chocolate, make Hershey, Sir Dre. And I asked his friends, where did that come from? And they said, Dre used that in the sense of when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And so that is the scholarship, which I'm so excited about. And then we also launched 2 programs last year. One is called Shoot Cameras, Not Guns Mentoring Program. My husband is a degree cinematographer, and he wrote and created this program for at-risk youth to show them how to pick up a camera to do something good versus turning to violence. And last year, we also launched Diamonds with a Purpose in partnership with an organization called Diamonds Last Forever. And we mentored women 18 to 35. During the pandemic, there was 110% increase in domestic violence, with a focus on Black women losing their lives to DV and gun violence. So we wanted to tap into that sector of women to see how we could support them into just being in a space of honesty and truth and changing their mindset. Both of those programs are Diamonds with a Purpose is launching year 2 in March, Shoot with Cameras in April. And then we have a grief support group for women impacted by gun violence. We also have a sibling support group called SCARS. And it's for siblings who have been impacted by gun violence. And we also have families with an array of things. Part of our aftercare is media support, cultivating your story, different opportunities. We help financially with utility bills. We've even been able to give assistance for funerals to families as well.
Wow, your organization does so many things.
Yes.
How do you guys find funding? Is it mostly donations?
We have really thrived off of monthly donors, partnerships, and we have received some grants in the past as well.
That's amazing. I know we're kind of closing out the interview, but do you have any parting words for our audience, or anything that you want to add about non-fatal shooting survivors?
Just want to say, end your lives matter. At the end of the day, those that are paralyzed, those that are shot and wounded, they're caretakers. They deserve a seat at the table. Life changes for everyone. I often say I visit a bedside. My friends on this journey visit gravesides, and none of it feels good. Today, someone said something so profound to me that I have never thought. And he said, "You've heard beeping of machines more than you've heard your son's voice in the last 9 years." And that is absolutely true. There are times where Dre tries and attempts to babble, but the word that I long to hear is mama. And I haven't heard it in so long, but I can tell you the sound of a life support machine because my son's been on it several times, 4 times in the last year alone. So I just want to say the end your lives matter. The journey of a caretaker who has to roll and dress their adult child, change diapers, change feeding tubes, change trach care. It's incredible. My front room turned into a hospital space when Dre came home. I had machinery that I had never heard of. I had to roll a mat under my son and crank him out of bed due to no fault of his own. So we do have a seat at the table, and we're here to change the conversation and the narrative on what it's like to survive gun violence.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this, for raising awareness for these individuals, because like you said, there are more people that are affected by non-fatal injuries than that are killed by gun violence. So thank you for bringing awareness to the issue in Indianapolis.
Absolutely. Thank you again for highlighting the issue. It's so important. It just can't be me talking about it.
Exactly. We'll have to talk about it.